Hi, Opimian members. Thanks for joining us tonight. As usual, we'll give a few minutes to people. I'm preparing my joke, so you can be ready for that.
Take your time, in other words.
Wow.
Sorry, that was mean.
I was going to do this with this guy, but I don't think I will after all. I'm going to do this myself. That was. I think we're getting to know each other too well, Michael.
We are, yes.
No, did you notice I put the name Michael and Michael?
I like that. And great. Your jokes are great. That was mean of me.
And people would mistake us for one another as well, you know, the two beards.
Except I can't tell us good jokes.
I'm a little younger. So we've got
let's get on with that.
We've got quite a few more people coming, so let's all right. Okay, so we'll do the joke, and this was Michael's idea. No, David Markovich is on the board. Hi, David. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. So he'll be watching for your questions in the chat, and we'll watch it too. And no, we're not in Australia, Crystal. We are actually. This beautiful backdrop behind us is the office of Opimian in Montreal. So, somebody needs to mute themselves. I don't know who that is, David. David's not doing his job. I don't know. That's so the joke is that I was actually having a glass of wine the other day, and my wife said, "I thought that this was dry January," and I said, "It is dry January. This is a Sauvignon Blanc." There, so you can put your applause in the chat. So we are here to do the Chapman Grove wines that you received as part of the Master's Case program. And as you know, the Master's Case program is designed to give you 3 styles of wine from the same winemaker, and that you can then get a sense of how they make wine. And we have somebody here who can explain all of this to you, because I certainly can't. And this is Michael Palij. He's one of our masters of wine. We now have several, as you know. Michael is Canadian born.
Indeed.
Lives in Oxford, England, and is an Italian wine expert as well as Australia.
Yes.
Yes. And although he spends very little time at home, he's always on the road, including you're actually here. What did you do today, Michael?
So we did mainly Bordeaux. A little bit of Beaujolais and a touch of Bergerac. And I was thinking, do they have to start with B at Opimian for me to be brought in to taste these?
We call this one the 3 Bs. So 3 Bs, that's right. So
Bordeaux, Bergerac, and Beaujolais.
That's right. And so he was tasting those today for the upcoming offering.
30,
and you only did like 40 or so today?
50 today.
50 today. Yeah. So not that bad. So we're here to talk about Chapman Grove.
Yeah,
and it's in Margaret River of Australia. Yeah, would you like to talk a little bit about Margaret River first?
Yeah, I think before that, I just want to say, I remember tasting these during the selection panel last year, and just blown away by the quality across Chapman Grove, and in particular, Ron's policy of releasing the wines just a little later, so that you can taste them with a little bit of bottle age. And I think one of the things that we always debate when we MWs go out for a drink is, does a wine have to be able to age to be great?
Have to be able to age
to be great. So and we would classically think, I don't know, Sancerre or something, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, could they ever be great because they don't really age? So that was the question. And a lot of times the criticism leveled at New World wines, with notable exceptions like Aussie Shiraz or Californian Cabernet, is that they do not age. They're made to provide all of that kind of drinkability early on. So with Chapman Grove, that flew firmly in the face of all of our assumptions about New World wines and their ability to age, because these were wines which were being released, some of them even with 20 years bottle age, and they were fantastic. And I remember clear as day tasting through these are amazing. You know, what a find. And I really liked them. So that's kind of the background. And then Margaret River, I don't know if you want a little, do you want some background on Margaret River?
Without question.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
I think everybody wants to know.
So here's the thing. I teach every year at the Sydney Wine Academy, which is why I'm in Australia all the time. And it is a 4-hour flight from Perth to Sydney, where
It's
I
a big
teach.
country.
It is, but because of the time difference, people were able to board their plane in Perth in the morning and still arrive in Sydney in time to get into class, notwithstanding the 4-hour flight.
Right.
Just to give you an idea of the scale of Australia, and Margaret River is very much out on its own in the extreme western part of Australia. So in the south, so in New South Wales, Victoria, and South Australia, you've got that cluster. Still a long way from Adelaide to Sydney would still be, I don't know, 1,000 miles or something like that. So it's still a long way. But they all seem to be clustered there. And then you've got this outpost way on the far side around Perth. And in fact, much changes because of the maritime influx. So Margaret River has got water on two sides, and that really creates a cooling influence. So if you look at Australia's proximity to the equator, it's very, very close to the equator. And therefore, day length isn't very long, and therefore temperatures are high. It's certainly the north of Australia grows sugarcane, they produce rum, it's tropical. And the south is still very, very hot with short days. So how do we ameliorate that and create perfect grape growing environment? And we do that through these external aspects like the cold water around Perth. So that's one of the key features of Margaret River.
Very cool. And that again, it is all about balance, isn't it? When you make a great wine, that you have to find ways of balancing those extremes out.
Well, sure, but even more so when you look at the grapes they're growing there. So Cabernet, Merlot, Sauvignon, Semillon, classic Bordeaux varietals,
right?
Which need that. And of course, if you're growing, I don't know, Touriga Nacional or Shiraz, Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, they'd be more resistant to the heat.
Right.
But these grape varieties need that cool environment.
Right on. And let's talk a little bit about Chapman Grove then. I mean,
sure. So set up by Ron Fraser.
Yeah.
The Ron comes from a retail background. So many people in Margaret River, they were doctors or lawyers, and this was sort of a bit like south of Victoria, the Yarra. Where they were sort of hobby farmers, and they'd made their money elsewhere. So he was in wine retail, so comes from a wine background, knew what he wanted to create, very passionate guy, bought Rosa Glen and planted it with traditional Bordelais varieties, and 20 years on, he's doing a fabulous job. And this part of the world has gravelly loam. So gravel, we all know what that is. Loam, you probably know what it is, but just in case you don't, it's sort of a silt sand combination, so not much clay, so more silt and sand, and then that admixture with gravel. Where else do we see that? Well, obviously Bordeaux.
Right.
So the soils there are perfect, and I guess the other thing to comment on is the other bits which would be sort of slightly higher up, and this is kind of the really clever bit about Margaret River, are decomposed granite. Now, if you think about granite, it doesn't decompose that easily, because it's really hard.
Yeah.
So it's not like limestone or something which you see, clay, classic clay limestone soil, which I don't know, you'd see in, I don't know, Tuscany, or you'd see in Burgundy. That we don't have in Margaret River. So it's either decomposed granite, which I think is brilliant for wines, or you've got the classic Bordelais soil type with this gravelly loam.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And so everybody, I hope that you've got your wines with you. We've got the 3 wines here as well, and we've got the pamphlet that you've all had. And I think what we'll do is we'll start with the Sauvignon Blanc. I assume.
Sure.
Yes, that would be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask questions in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer them. And someone has asked if this will be on YouTube at a later date. Florence, yes, it will. It usually takes a day or two for us to get it prepared. Needs a bit of editing because of my bad jokes and such. And then by then we can put it on YouTube, and people will actually watch it.
So, yes. So I'll just hold this up. So this, just so you know, you've got the right bottle. So this is Saucem, 13% ABV and 2018. And look, I know we all know that vintages are important in Bordeaux and vintages are important in Burgundy. The vintages are important in Australia. we don't know about them as much. We're not familiar with them in the way that we would, be able to rhyme off what happened in 2018 in Bordeaux or Burgundy, but they are important. 2018, and one of the reasons why I really wanted to focus on this vintage, it was kind of 10 out of 10. So if you look at the summation for heat and you look at the summation for rainfall in 2018, it was very regular, but regular in terms of long-term annual trends, but it was really disparate in when it happened. So you had really hot months and really cold months, so it bounced around a lot, really wet months and really dry months. And overall, that led to just perfect growing conditions. So quite a long growing season. If you think about somewhere like Hunter, which is also in Australia, closer to Sydney and much closer to the equator, you know, they're harvesting in January. So they'd be harvesting probably 2 months later in Margaret River. So much longer hang times. And this is just in stainless steel. And I think it's great. I love that nose.
Yeah.
And I'm 4 years old now, and just have you
yeah, and clean as a whistle.
Clean
I don't
as a
think we-
whistle.
Cheers.
No,
Yeah,
cheers.
good to see you.
Nice to see
Yeah.
you. And this, I love that. So this kind of tinned veg on the nose, so sweet corn, green bean, asparagus, that kind of character, and no oak, which is nice. Slight gooseberry note from the Sauvignon, a kind of wax or wet wool from the Semillon.
Wet wool.
Wet wool, yeah, sort of like, you know, like if you're I don't know, like a sheepskin jacket in the rain, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that doesn't happen to me a lot, but
You don't have a sheepskin jacket.
I don't. But I do love this wine. I just think it's remarkably good. It's so clear, and you know what, to me, and there's no connection at all, but it's also very crisp for me, and that has nothing to do with the clarity, right?
No, but it is, it's because, and that's natural acidity. So you don't get that sometimes on New World whites and on reds. You get that chalkiness on the back of the palate, which for me always indicates that they've added a little bit of acidity. And plenty of places in Australia, they are adding acid. But this was a vintage. It was all dry grown. You know, there's no need to irrigate.
Wow.
Just sort of as Mother Nature intended. And in terms of food, I think this is aperitif style. So treat as you would probably for Chablis, that kind of thing. So fish, shellfish.
Yeah, and our writer has said goat's cheese salad. I think.
Yeah, goat's cheese.
Yeah, would cut
perfect.
through that.
Yeah.
To the fattiness of the cheese, and
yeah. No, and vegetarian dishes. Obviously, it's not got enough stuffing to take on meat, but you know, that's not its stock in trade.
No, and if anybody has any other tasting notes that they have of their own of what they're tasting, please let us know. We really enjoy hearing from you guys too. So and again, aperitif. So again, sipping on its own.
Yeah.
Even. Yeah. And would you put this with fish? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you could put it with fish, oily fish, tuna. But nothing. A lot of times with food and wine matching, we tend to think of what I call the protein vehicle.
Right.
You know, that's the tuna or the pork or the beef or whatever it is, but actually the sauce is probably more important.
Right.
And the method of cooking.
Makes perfect
So
sense.
I think, and not that and in fact, it's not just about Italy. You would do exactly the same thing if you were in a restaurant in Margaret River, but that simple fresh fish on the grill, bit of sea salt.
My mouth's watering.
And that's all you need.
Yeah, we haven't had dinner yet, and
We haven't.
It's getting kind of European time.
Almost.
Okay,
So yeah, no, I really like this. You know, this is unoaked, crisp, clean, well made, not pretending to be anything it isn't. A really delicious example of great Sauv Sem, which is a classic Margaret River style. So you'd get it in Bordeaux as well, but it's definitely, you know, a popular style in Margaret River.
Very, very good. So then I talked to you, Michael, about when we were going to do these reds, which one we do first and which one second. And typically, as you're tasting, you would want to do the lighter body, lighter tannin wine before you would do the next one.
Yes, there's a current school of thought which says you should do reds before whites, but that's not a school of thought to which I subscribe. Yeah, I've done the white, and then going to do the Cab Shiraz Merlot,
right,
from 18, and then the Cab Shiraz from 17, which was a distinctly cooler vintage, is a bit more grippy and tannic.
So the 3 wine blend is going to be first here, everybody, and then we'll do the 2 wine blend after that. Yeah.
And quick question from Randine: spaghetti alla Nerano. Now what is a Nerano at home? Go on, type it into the chat. What's a Nerano?
We're going to wait for this. Do you want me to tell a joke? No, there it is.
Ah, with zucchini.
Zucchini.
Okay.
Oh,
I'll
isn't
learn
that
that out.
interesting?
So is Nerano a place? I assume. I just there's not many Italian
Yeah.
dishes I haven't heard of, so it's always interesting to see. Nerano.
From the
Amalfi
Coast.
Coast. Ah,
Oh,
okay.
very nice.
Right. I was there not long ago. In fact,
That's a beautiful spot.
it is. Yeah, I went to Lo Scoglio, which I don't know if any of you have heard of, but it's terribly trendy at the moment on the Amalfi Coast.
Well, then you've got to be there. I mean, you are Mr. Trent.
I have to be there. Jolly nice of us.
Yes.
Lo Scoglio, if you're going to the Amalfi Coast, yes, it is his favorite of Stanley Tucci, and
Yes.
I'm sad to say I'm a member of a private members club in London, and they had I know it's horrible. They had the chef of Lo Scoglio come over for well, I don't need to go to that.
It's
So Lo
wonderful.
Scoglio is amazing, yes, and the Amalfi Coast is amazing. However, top tip: stay in Sorrento, don't stay in Amalfi. There you go.
Yes.
Top travel.
So
Okay,
I have to take a few minutes here and talk about my espresso and lemon twists. Right?
Yes.
So I actually was in Amalfi and at one of the cafes like Stanley Tucci. I don't have my own show, but I'm working on it. And they actually serve a twist of lemon with the espresso. And I asked what that was all about, and I put that twist of lemon in the espresso, and it was much better. And the oils, the citrus oils, actually cut down on the bitterness of the coffee.
Right.
And I really found that neat. So I was actually in France last year with Opimian members and went to a place in Carcassonne, and I asked for a twist of lemon with my coffee, and they brought out the entire lemon had been
fabulous.
Yes, and it was on a bed of salt, and so I took a piece and I put it into my espresso, and the waiter came back to the table and asked if that was okay. I said yes, and he said, "We tried this in the kitchen. We don't like it." It was just fantastic. So let's talk wine.
That's the difference between France and Italy.
Yes, that's right. Yes, exactly.
Good. Okay, so 2018, we talked about the vintage. This is Cabernet, Shiraz, and Merlot, and the emphasis is on Cabernet. And 12 months combination of barrel and stave. So again, you probably all know this, but for those of you who don't, it's what they call inner staves. So it's
inert, did you
no
say?
inner
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a metal ring, and then they dangle down, think like a sort of almost like a tea bag effect. They dangle the staves off that on short little chains, and then they just bob that in the wine.
They literally move it through the wine?
They literally move it through the wine, and that gives an oak effect,
right,
without the cost of
a barrel
of the barrel. Yeah,
right.
So this is partly in barrel and partly stave.
Right.
Just if you don't know, if you see a reference to that, that's what it means. And of course, the difference between that and less expensive methods of using oak, like chips, for example, is you can choose the quality of the stave as you would had you been buying the entire barrel. Okay, so Cabernet Shiraz Merlot, obviously Cab Merlot would be the classic blend, which you would see all over the world, and here treated to an Aussie twist with a bit of Shiraz thrown in.
Probably for some fruit forwardness, like something like that.
Yeah, and Cab and Shiraz both pretty tannic grape varieties, and Merlot just a little softer. And here I think it just provides a bit of lift on the nose. So if you smell that, so chocolate and coffee, a lot of those kind of what we call empyromatic characteristics, sort of around the notion of burnt, but not burnt in a bad way, but just those toasty characteristics.
Right. Yeah.
And really ripe, bright fruit again, and the oak is there, which I think, but it's really skillfully done, and it's just kind of supporting the fruit.
And when you do the stave method, do you get less oak? Because it's not touching the oak for as long, right? You don't leave it in as long as you would if it was sitting in the barrel itself.
Sure, and that just gives you a bit more choice.
Right. Okay.
And that's a nice the acidity. That's great, isn't it? Wine is not vodka and grape juice mixed together. That is not the recipe for wine. So we've got to have that acidity, which makes it so good with food.
Right.
And I can see this with lamb or pork. Probably more because of that acidity. I might put this more with lamb. Lamb is, we always think of pork as being very fatty, but the meat itself, pork is the leanest meat, just looking at the meat. Right. And lamb is the fattiest. And I think with fat, I always call it the kind of the windscreen wiper with fat. You want something to cleanse the palate. It doesn't matter if that's smoked salmon, which is quite oily, or an oily fish or an oily meat, anything, or fatty cheese, anything like that. And that windscreen wiper could be alcohol. So like port and Stilton works really well together because you've got that high alcohol cleansing the palate. Or it could be acidity. So if you think about Riesling and smoked salmon, then again, you've got that acidity. So here I love that acidity, and I'd probably put that with lamb.
Very good.
Yeah, and really lovely fresh fruit. I like the complexity in that. I don't think the oak's overdone. Do you? I think it's got it just right.
It's everybody always hears me say how much I enjoy the wines. I don't know if you've noticed how intimidated I am about saying anything about the wine with Michael here, but I don't want to get it wrong. But, yeah. And
I think it's like, and it finishes really clean. It's kind of the finishes pull together really nicely.
And if anybody out there has something to say about this wine, we sure want to hear that as well.
Yeah.
And when I look at the difference in the look of these wines and the color of these wines, there's a little bit of difference. Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
and I would think that I'm trying to think is the Cab Shiraz is not going to have, like you said, the Merlot will have a little less tannin
and just soften it out a little,
softer tannin, softer tannin. So then that takes us to this third wine then.
Yeah, which is my favorite of the three, to be honest.
Okay.
But I'm a traditionalist, and those of you who follow my tasting notes in the catalogs will know that I always mark up those wines which have that kind of traditional structure. And I don't make any excuse for that. Wine is so personal, and you really, the first thing is to drink what you want, when you want, and with whom you want. Nothing else matters, right? This is not a organ transplant. This is fun. And this is what I like.
Nobody's going to die.
Nobody's going to die, and this is what I like. You might not like it, and that's okay. We'll still shake hands on something else. But I love the structure of this, and I think 17 slightly cooler, which again I like, and I like Italian reds, which are tannic and acidic, and that's my thing.
And Connie's asking what fruits you're getting on this wine, and I will say to Connie that I sometimes poke my head into the tasting room while they're doing the tastings, and Michael, I'll say to Michael, "What are you getting on this?" And he rhymes off 10 or 12 things where I'm getting 1 or 2. So what are you getting?
Okay, before that, I guess I would just like to say that whatever you're picking up on the wine is fine. So we talk about all of these things which we get in wine, and often quite fanciful descriptions. My favorite of all time, with the 30 years I've been in the wine trade, is a wheelbarrow full of ugly fruit, which was an English wine critic who said that.
Right.
And I just thought about the lunacy of that, because a wheelbarrow, and then ugly fruit, nobody's ever tasted an ugly fruit, and the wheelbarrow, was it level load or was it heaped up,
Yeah.
And so don't be intimidated by that kind of language, and don't be intimidated by what I say. If you're not getting that, that's completely fine. Everything we're tasting tonight is made from grapes, and therefore if you say anything other than this wine smells of grapes, there's a high percentage chance that you're being pretentious. So with that,
I don't find you at least a pretentious.
No.
No.
So with that as a background, so dealing with the kind of the Cabernet component, I'd call that first. So, and this is all pretty textbook. It smells like Cabernet Shiraz, I have to say. So black currant or cassis, and I think maybe rather than, I always think like try and just think of the big general category first, and then you can whittle it down as time goes on. So black fruit, I think if we said it could be red fruit or black fruit, this is clearly black fruit. Maybe just see if you get that. So so I think that's black fruit. Blackberry, mulberry, plum, black cherry, black currant. Cassis is something just slightly cooked or jammy about it, which takes me from black currant into cassis. And then the Shiraz component, there's not a lot of Shiraz in this, about 20%, so not tons. And the Shiraz component in that would be the crushed black pepper, which I think is a really nice spicy lift to that. And then there's a little bit of the oak, which you're picking up as clove or cinnamon, vanilla, sawdust, char, toast.
Are you literally getting all of those things?
No, I'm just trying to make sure that Connie feels included. That if she's getting any of those things, they're all correct.
No, for sure.
So because I think a lot of times that it is just too easy for wine to be pretentious, and we feel like we're excluding people.
Mm.
And you always get this at dinner parties, particularly people who, you know, they don't know that I'm an MW, and you see them swirling it going, oh, that's fantastic, I'm getting, and off they go, right? And then you say I'm a master of wine, and it's like, that's the end of that conversation.
I mean,
so I don't want
to. Certain palates get certain things, like black pepper is one that is one of the ones I notice quite a bit. And blueberry, whenever there's something, there's a hint of blueberry in something, I tend to get it. But then there's other things and
the science behind it suggests that. So for example, for any of those components, once you narrow down the chemical formula for that, you would find that sensitivity across the population for that is a standard Gaussian distribution curve. So for I don't know, in Sauvignon Blanc, that classic thing that we saw a little bit of, methoxypyrazine. You know, if you looked at sensitivity to methoxypyrazine, you would find a standard distribution curve. Some people are more sensitive, some people are less sensitive. So whenever you had Sauvignon Blanc and you were super sensitive to that, you'd stick your nose and go, oh, that's Sauvignon Blanc.
Right.
And then somebody else might be less, but the other person might be more sensitive to, like, you know, another component.
And then you get to pass the Wine and Spirits Educational Trust if you happen to get the right wine on the test. I don't know if any of you have ever done that test where they've got the paper to see if you're a super taster or not, and if you find it to be horrendously awful, means you're a super taster, and I am not. So, and
even if you were, then don't rule yourself in or out of being able to enjoy wine, please.
No, for sure.
I'd hate to be labeled as a super taster or.
Oh, and no, I think that the idea, I think being a super taster is not a good thing. You taste things so strongly that you can't enjoy them, in fact, and it can be a real problem. No, you don't agree with me. I can tell he doesn't agree with me.
I don't know. I think, you know, if you're a super taster, then you will gravitate towards whatever wine flicks your switches, and you'll say, I like Californian Zinfandel or whatever.
But I think you need softer wines then, because you get the tastes are so strong for you that you don't want something that hits you.
Absolutely, but it doesn't mean the world of wines ruled out for you.
No.
You just go find something you do like.
That would be too sad. So if anybody has any questions, we've done the 3 wines from Chapman. We've gotten another one of our TMCs under our belt, which is excellent. Thank you very much, Michael. We really appreciate it.
But are there any questions? It doesn't just need to be about these 3 wines. If there's something you were always wanting to know but afraid to ask,
that's right,
chuck it in the chat box and we'll answer it.
Absolutely. And I've my family's going to Australia really soon, so they're going to check. Or no, New Zealand. They're going to check that out. Yeah. So you can't do both; it's too big. And so what are with I'm wondering with fruit. I think that the Cab Shiraz will benefit from some aging.
Yeah, and you know, absolutely, and more than the previous one, to be fair, which isn't to say the previous one wasn't delicious, but perhaps more ready to go, and this one you could keep tucked away for a few years.
You know what? I've got a constant question all the time, and I apologize everybody if I bore you with this, but when it's under screw cap, it can still age. Does it get the micro oxygenation? Because that's typically what is aging the wine, right?
Yeah.
It's going through the cork, you're getting minuscule bits of oxygen. So then how does it do it when it's under screw cap?
Well, it ages without the benefit of oxygen, but other processes still take place.
Oh, okay.
But it does hold it more inert, just simply because you haven't got that oxygen transfer through the cork.
Right.
So,
and you're less likely to have a faulted wine, right?
You are much less likely to have a faulty wine, although screw caps can be corked, because the what we call cork is actually a compound called trichloroanisole, which can exist in a winery outside of cork.
Okay. Right.
So if you think about the name trichloroanisole, that's got chlorine in it, and that's why it's so smelly. They stopped bleaching cork with chlorine years ago.
Oh, interesting.
And you still have corkiness. So you can get champagne that's corked, you can get screw cap wines that are corked, much less often. But the reason why is if you think about the bottling machine, the screw caps come in these sort of sleeves that they just chuck in the machine and then they all go off, whereas corks get popped into a hopper. So say, for example, somebody in the winery is cleaning with bleach.
Sure.
You got an open hopper, you've got more chance of contact than if you've got these like little tight little sleeves that just go slotted into the machine.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So but you can still get corked screw cap wines.
Right.
In terms of their evolution, I suppose at the end of the day, for the world's finest wines, cork is better. Does that matter for 99.999% of the world's wines? No.
Right. And again, I think that sense of there are no good wine or great wines under screw cap is incorrect. Right?
That is incorrect. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think at the ultimate end of maturation for greatness, then you would still prefer natural cork over everything else.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And Steve, I agree with you that it's a pity this didn't happen during the offering. Supply chain has just been a nightmare for us, and we're getting back on track. As you know, we're doing several of these really close together so that we can get caught up. And our intent now will be to do these the Master's Case tastings during the one following, so that you'll have an opportunity to rebuy these wines if they're offered again, which the majority are. So it's a game out there, isn't it, Michael? You know all about Michael sells wine as well, and he's
just dealing with the monopolies is extraordinary.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that's the topic. We'll have to have another.
That's right. We can talk about. We can complain. We'll do a complainer.
Complaining pitching session.
And just simply like us finding containers to get the wine to Canada has been really, really tough, and everything's getting more expensive. So that's been tough. So I apologize for that, Steve. And thank you for your understanding. That's great. And you know what, we really are working on it, and I'm feeling very, very confident that 2023 is going to be a better year for sure, and we hope that we can keep that going. So, well, that's great. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, David, for your work on this, and thanks everybody. And
thank you. Cheers
to all of you Opimian members.
Cheers.
And we'll see you on the next one.
See you next time.
Okay. Good night.